So welcome, Dr. Rebecca Bailey. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us on the Safe and Sound Protocol podcast. And I look forward to our discussion today to learn all about your work with the Polyvagal Institute. But let's start with letting our listeners know a little bit more about you, your background, your journey, and what that journey has led to forming the Polyvagal Institute or Polyvagal Equine Institute.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we get confused with the Polyvagal Institute all the time. We are very blessed to have been given permission to be the Polyvagal Equine Institute, and I take that as a huge honor. So I am a psychologist in Northern California. I have been involved in animal-assisted therapy since about 1989. I like to say, and I just recently wrote a book, self-published, called Equine Connections, Polyvagal Principles. And in that book, you hear about my early childhood relationship with my beautiful horse, Locket. And Locket was this incredible quarter horse mare that could jump the moon, and did, with a roached mane, and was amazing. And she was my co-regulator. I grew up outside of Boston. There was a lot of tumultuousness in my house, I would like to say. And she would literally, I'd come home from school and I'd go down to the barn, and she would take her head and pull me to her. And that was my source of co-regulation in my life. And so I believe that that little horse, Locket, is how this all started. So just without yakking on and on, I did my work with animal-assisted therapy, had a private practice, did a lot of work with abduction, familial and non-familial, had the blessed meeting and work with a woman named J.C. Dugard, who was held captive for many years, 18 years, as a matter of fact, and emerged out of the backyard with 2 small children. And she was sent to treatment with me, with her whole extended family. And at the time, I had started my program, Transitioning Families, where we had cooking and horses and hiking and really non-traditional. And speaking of non-traditional, it's unusual, even in the US, to have a psychologist out there patient at that time. She's no longer my client. But early on, it was very, very clear that JC was a lot more together than most of the people that I've met in my world. And so when she went on to do a big network show, she said, could you please come on and show and tell people I'm okay, she's okay, which is how it all came out. So I just say that. In the process of working with JC, I incorporated the equine work, which I'd been doing for many years. And my herd of horses, which is 2 big and 2 littles, took her in. I mean, literally took her in, and her family in. And I can almost say the interventions from day to day, we did lots and lots of work with the whole family, were mostly guided by them.
By the horses.
By the horses. I mean, you know, just one of my favorite ones is we were playing, we had this big ball in the arena, and one of the mares was pushing it around, and right at that point my black lab came in. I thought, oh my God, the dog and the horse shouldn't be in the arena, because I don't like dogs in the arena with horses. And just at that moment, the horse kicked the ball over to the dog, who kicked it back to the horse, that kicked it back to the dog. And it was just this beautiful moment. And I never really say this part, but it's kind of cool. I look over, and sitting in the corner is my beautiful Hanoverian, laying down with her 2 daughters. So hello, thank you, safe and sound. Safety, the whole thing was safety. So I'll go really quickly. And so how Polyvagal Equine Institute came to be is JC and myself were trying to dissuade the world of using the word Stockholm. And it was very important to her and other people, Elizabeth Smart, people like this, who was not a patient, but I had connected with, who were saying Stockholm Syndrome is offensive. We do not fall in love with our captors. We do what we need to survive. So prior to meeting JC and some of these other ladies, I was using the learned helplessness model and thinking, this is what it is. And then I started thinking, this is not what it is. this is something different. So long story, we ended up meeting Sue Carter and Stephen Porges and having dinner in Cape Cod and really having this great conversation. And what came to be from all of us was the word appeasement. And JC and myself and Dr. Porges and another psychologist, Dr. Smith, has just written an article called Appeasement in the British Journal of Traumatology, which is really cool. So how does that all fit into polyvagal? And I hope I'm not letting you get a word in edgeways. I'm sorry. I'm almost there.
Perfect. No, perfect.
So what happened was in the mid-90s, I had a program called Equine Mirrors. That wasn't it. Horses don't mirror us. They have their own nervous system. So I had that for about 2 years, and I kept thinking, what am I seeing? What is really happening with these horses? When I got the language from polyvagal, I began to understand what it is a conversation between nervous systems. So that's how that really began. My dear friend Margie McDonald, who I've ridden horses with for 43 years, amazing, amazing woman of very quiet words, but has that nervous system that resonates with horses. So we brought her in, JC, and her experience, and we decided to kick off Polyvagal Equine Institute to help professionals learn how to do this work, to help professionals learn how to get in touch with their own nervous system, and really to help horses help humans. Because what I was seeing with some of the really pioneering programs out there was they were expecting the horses to do all the work. And the horses can't. I mean, you'd have these clients coming to some of the models that are fine models. There's some not good things about some of them, and the horses were supposed to break through the years of narratives that were in people's heads, and nobody was helping, explain. So I really believe that the human facilitator is also really important in the variable. So the first step is that internalization of safety, the connection with the horse, the nervous system, all of that. And then you need a facilitator to maybe help shed a different lens, shine a different lens on what somebody's saying or thinking, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So you have just kind of answered a lot of the questions that I was actually had in mind. And I'm so glad that you brought up, obviously your work with JC is pretty pivotal. And I know that she has, from what I've read and been watching, she has a strong voice to help bring more awareness to the possibilities that doing equine work in mental health can really bring. So I'm glad that you shared that, and I'm sure there's more to that we can sort of bring up. But I guess from everything you've kind of said, maybe just unpack a little bit more. Why horses? Why horses? What is so unique or so powerful about what they bring to the therapeutic setting?
So if your listeners are horse people, and some of them may not be, if they're horse people, they know. And they know there is the science, and they know there is the quote magic. I mean, the things that none of us can explain what the horse did. But for me, the fundamental from talking to non-horse people is that horses live their entire existence around their neuroception. So neuroceptions, Porges's word, as you know, for am I safe, am I not safe, really, that's the horse's world. When they're in bridles and saddles and all that stuff, or even sometimes halters, that's their neuroception is sort of, put on hold a little bit, because they but they're still scanning around, am I safe, am I not safe? And so how we like to do is we really like to work with our horses without halters on whenever possible, all those things, and let them go back to their natural instinct of sort of assessing the world around them. And that can even include, and this is the thing I always had trouble really understanding, but even detecting authenticity. I've seen over and over and over that if somebody says one thing and does something else, or presents in a different way, then they might be saying all of those things that a horse may react in a funny way. So, or they may shut down. But so to answer your question, really, they have what I call a huge neuroceptive radar. They're also amazingly beautiful, incredibly powerful. When you're physically touching them, there's the vasopressin and oxytocin release that happens. But the fact of the matter is that, in my mind, they really epitomize what humans ought to learn how to do, which is to let go a little more easily. If that makes sense.
Lovely said. I think for, I do have horses, and, we have listeners all around the world that, will have some or not. But I think what I'd like for our discussion is to sort of just to unpack a bit of that, the power of therapeutically what they sort of bring to when you're working with somebody in a mental health sort of capacity. So for practitioners who are listening, who may want to learn more about this modality, or for listeners who are on their own sort of healing journey, sort of maybe to sort of open their thinking up, is this possibly some part of my healing journey that this piece may help bring? Because some people go through lots of different therapies, and maybe this might be an answer for them. And I totally agree in terms of, from a polyvagal lens, the horse just definitely obviously live in neuroception, but they're, the sensory component of it, and that sort of sense of connection. Once you actually have that with a horse, it's just the feelings that it helps to evoke within yourself can be just very, very powerful, I think. So in terms of, because there are equine other therapy approaches out there, so doing it from a polyvagal lens, how does that look different?
So the number one focus in our polyvagal lens is the word safety is taken very, very seriously, meaning safety for all the participants, the facilitators, and the horses. And incidentally, sometimes when people come that maybe are afraid of horses, sometimes the cat comes in as the conduit for connection, whatever that is. But it really means taking that message of, what does it feel to feel safe and connected? Now, that being said, for some people, that's very scary. That's an experience they don't know what that feels like. And so even feeling connected for a few minutes can actually be very activating to the nervous system. But from the therapeutic piece, what we really feel is the first step is to learn about your own nervous system. And so when you're interfacing early on in the work we do, the number one focus is get out of your head into your heart a little bit. And then you can go back out into your head, but really get into, what does it feel like? What does it feel like to stand near this incredibly beautiful, sentient being? What is it like when you turn your back? All of these different things. What do you feel in your body? Because so many of us are completely detached from really what's going on in this body, because up here the brain is driving. Traditional therapy has been very cognitive based, and that has its place, definitely has its place. But still, in my mind, until you really understand what's driving that narrative, the physiological thing that's driving the narrative, it's really easy to get lost in the story. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. Yes. And I think in one of your presentations and other presentations, we hear, there's that growing understanding now that trauma is really held in the body. So doing work where it's more body-based, we actually get, it's more grounding, where it's a more opportunity then to access the brain, where people can refile away those memories, or sort of assess those memories. So going in through the body is a great way. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because one of the things, I had the luxury of having a wonderful dinner with Deb Dana and Stephen Porges in, doesn't matter where, a year ago, and got into a discussion about, trauma. And it's not even that, this had to bend my mind a little bit, that I've always said trauma is not what happens to you, it's not your pain. It's not your shame, sorry. And, during this conversation, we were talking about that, but then talking about how trauma is not the thing, it's your body's response to trauma, period. So it's like the physiological response to the trauma is where the issue is, which really fits my experience in working with a variety of individuals that have been traumatized. Now it's hard right now because everybody calls themselves a trauma therapist. I don't even call myself that because it's very cliche these days. But really understanding with many of the people that I have worked with that have been through very extreme circumstances, they don't want to talk about it. They don't need to talk about it. What they need to do is help their body come to peace and get out of a feeling of fight, flight, or lack of safety. And sometimes that means understanding, and I'm thinking of one individual I'm working with right now, that when she starts feeling connected to me, then she goes to sympathetic because it's really scary because she's been hurt by a number of humans in her life. And so my job is to help her experience that feeling of sympathetic arousal in response to the social engagement pathways being activated. And that makes such sense to me. Doesn't mean that people don't have to talk about it sometime, but I will tell you, I've also talked and worked with a number of women, and it is women in this case, that were given the roofie drug, and they cannot remember, and they're driving themselves crazy trying to remember the specifics of the event. And when we help them move out of that into understanding your body has got to let go of the thing that saved your butt during that experience, that's where we see the healing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how would you use horses in that way then, in terms of helping people be more aware of what actually feels to feel safe, or when they're feeling more activated? How would you use horses in that manner?
So, of course, depending on the individuals, but for some people, even the tactile connection, for some people, it's the dance between their nervous system and the horse's nervous system. There's a curiosity that horses, I can never say that when you put human characteristics on a horse, I may be doing this, but I do feel like sometimes horses are very curious about people too. And so when you see that sort of dance between the nervous systems, it becomes a safe connection. So that's one way. One way is observing and watching them go up through the different stages. You watch a horse that might jump because a cat goes by, and then you watch them settle again. Now that's where, so it doesn't sound like mumbo jumbo, that's where I say the human in the case would be, if I'm working with somebody like that, I might say, well, what do you think just happened? And sometimes they'll say, it would be more a different experience, but they might say, oh, the horse didn't like me, or the horse doesn't want to be here. So you let them talk about that, talk about how it feels in their body. And then you might say, well, here's an alternative hypothesis. Did you see the cat walking along the fence? Often they don't, because they're so used to attributing the event to something they did or shouldn't have done or whatever. So that's another way. It really depends on what the person is coming to you for. And if they're coming because they just want to learn more about their nervous system, it might be a different thing. Like, what does it feel as you're closer to the horse, stepping away from the horse, interacting with the horse? And if I'm really honest, there's some things that we just don't quite understand. Like the kid in my workshop who said many years ago to his father, when I said, what do you want your father to do? And the kid said, I want my dad to eat shit, sorry. And the horse went over and took a bite of horse manure and squeezed it on the dad's bald head. What? And thank God this dad laughed, because that lightened the kid up. Because the kid's like, but so what is that, right? What was that? I don't know. So I can be very polyvagal scientific oriented. And then I can go, there's these things that I don't quite get.
Yeah. And I think I'm totally with you there. And I know this is I had this one situation when I just got this new horse, and he was recently off the track, so very sort of still on all his feed. and but he come with, which a lot of off the tracks come with, a lot of feet issues, and he had, you know, a lot of difficulties. So farrier's coming first time, and I'd only had the horse 2 weeks, so he was still getting to know me, and you know, was not feeling safe, would not cooperate for the farrier, to the point where the farrier was like, I'm not going to be able to help this horse. I can't. He's going to need to be sedated to get his feet done. And I just had this breath and this emotion come over me, like, oh my gosh, if I don't get, you know, like my energy going to my horse of like, if you don't let him help your feet, we're not going to, you know, you're going to be in pain. And within a moment, he just put his head down and just stood there. And for me, it was like this moment of like, did he just read my thoughts? And I've had little moments, moments like that, though things happen. But I think part of it, I think the beauty of what we can bring in this sort of work is they're unpacking the subtleness of what the different messages that their body language can provide to us, that then we can unpack into helping people see the body language that we get from each other. Because I think I'm sure you're you know, agree with me there.
I love what you said, because here's another, I'm always into multiple hypotheses on everything, which is how I stay in my veterinary land. The other one is that you dropped the tension about the feet, you know, somehow. And so this horse felt that and responded. And that's the dance between nervous systems I'm talking about. Now, there are some really great equestrians. Dominique Barbier, really incredible dressage rider who trained with Nuno Olivieri, who suggests that horses think in pictures. And that there may be some truth to that with some of the things I've experienced. But if you think about that neuroception of really picking up on your nervous system, where whatever it was, you sent out something that said, I'm really concerned, I'm really curious, I'm really compassionate. This is not coming from dominance. And that made the relaxation. And those are those subtle things. And that's the type of thing, you being you probably got that. If you were a client, you probably would need the facilitator to say, hey, here's another option. So that is so cool. That's such a great example. I love that. That's polyvagal principle. Perfect. Now, I still don't know about the poop on the head. I don't know unless the dad gave out some sort of like, I don't know, just really weird. But
yes, yeah, that is, yeah. But I think, yeah, they're an interesting part to add to the picture, aren't they? Definitely.
They really are. And, you know, with the therapeutic interventions, I also want to say that I really believe the whole experience, the smell of the barn, the people that are there, people that are doing this work or going to a barn, make sure that it's a real, where you just get out of the car and you feel welcome, you don't feel exposed, there's not 500 boarders there with their horses, you know. And I will say with my clients, you know, the guy who's feeding the horses is introduced, you know, we don't say this is the client's name, but it's like, so there's no surprises of who's around. This is a very protected place. The smell, we slow down, we smell the barn together, all those olfactory things. And we usually bring some humor in. All of these are vagal activators, as well as the sound of the birds. There's usually swallows up in the rafters where I am making noises, and you may slow them down enough to hear. So you're taking the whole environment in internally. So,
and I know you speak about the motor component, that sitting, talking on a couch versus getting up. Obviously, we've got the whole nature, being in nature as component, and we're interacting with these amazing animals, but there's a motor component that triggers neurochemicals, those, you know, endorphins and serotonin. So just physically doing something.
Everybody's pushing, and I'm going to be controversial, everybody's pushing EMDR in this country. Everybody's supposed to have EMDR. Look, I have respect for all different types. I think EMDR is fine for some people, not for people, not everyone. And but I do think some of that movement is some of it, all of it. But I do know with many of my clients, and this is not about EMDR, but sitting in a room and looking is too activating. So going on a walk, walking with the horse, There's been research years ago, not years and years, but some time now, on veterans walking on treadmills who are able to process at the same time, they're able to process PTSD. I also say on that one, I've said this a million times, the therapist needs a treadmill too, because we as clinicians, we deserve to really, when we talk about self-care, it's more than going to the spa and doing yoga. It's also like we go on a journey with our clients in extreme trauma, and we need to make sure that we're doing something for us. So for me, hiking with my clients, being with the horses, it's giving to me as much as it is to the people I work with.
Mm-hmm. Nicely said, nicely said. So I know you also do groups. So how would you do run groups using a horse facilitator?
Groups are hard. The deep psychological groups, I have to admit, I'm not very adept at. I've done a few trauma groups. I'm just not adept at it. I don't know what it is. But when I incorporate the horses into a polyvagal focus, it seems to go a little bit better. The type of groups I love to do with the horses is like training police officers. We have a group of 8 judges coming this weekend, and we're doing a whole day with the horses. Those type of groups I really, really like. And a good example of Polyvagal Principles in training the police officers was a couple of years ago. We were doing a group in the arena, and there were 3 loose horses that always are out together. You need to make sure your horses have been out together and know each other. And they were in the arena, and the officers were so funny. They kept picking up a rail to move. And every time they picked up the rail, the horses would gallop around, and it took them 15 minutes. And me saying, wow, maybe they're reacting to something other than you guys. Because these guys were scared. They're like, whoa, this is really scary. We're scaring the horses. Our presence is. And then finally we're like, so pick up the rail. What just happened? And they're like, oh. And it was such a powerful lesson in what I'm doing here influences your nervous system, which then influences mine. One of us has to regulate and stay still. It was pretty neat. So I like groups for teaching skill-based work. Occasionally I might do an extreme trauma with 4 or 5 clients that I know, but as I said, it's a lot to hold. And even with the horses, it's a lot to hold. There are people listening that can do it beautifully. It's also a lot for the horses all at once, I think.
People holding that trauma. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I had the privilege of watching you work in a group of, I think, practitioners. You got working through the dealing with the fires that you had in California, and I loved how you kept on referring to where was their autonomic nervous system. I know you used Deb Dana's ladder, but through the whole process of them working with where that is sitting in their body, and then how they're resourcing each other, and then using the horse within that. And I thought you did a beautiful job. So.
I saw that, Joanne. One of the very few that has seen that. It's going to be on Polyvagal Institute,
Yes.
But you lucky dog. I'm a little, we have grown since that presentation. But that particular day was kick butt, I think. I agree. And kind of the thing that I know in working with groups and with practitioners, just like working with horses, you got to go with what's in front of you, and you have to stay focused on what you're there for, the informed consent of the group. But sometimes the horses and the practitioners will take you elsewhere. But I can't believe you saw that.
Well, I think what I wanted to share, another observation I had, that the lesson we learned, what they bring is, yeah, sometimes things don't go according to plan. And how does that sit in your nervous system when, I can't remember the fellow's name. He was a beautiful big buckskin, I believe, but he didn't want to lead it in because of his own trauma. But so how does that everyone sit when the plan doesn't go according to plan? But also the idea of being patient, to letting somebody get to the point where their nervous system felt safe, that they could move forward. So yeah, so for people who are going to get to watch that in the future, those are some great lessons.
That guy Summit is a horse that was absolutely, I'm an English writer, ridden my whole life, had fancy pants horses, and he was given to me, I guess he was a rescued bucking horse. And to this day, and all the work we do is on the ground, but to this day, if you ride him and you have any frustration at all in your body, he'll buck. He won't buck to hurt you, but buck enough that you can't go forward. And so you have to completely regulate on that horse. And I'm the only one that rides this horse because nobody else thinks it looks fun. I don't think it's fun. I respect that guy's nervous system. And what I think is he is the master teacher for me. Ridden, as I said, my whole life, showed fancy horses, and I'm out there with my friends on their fancy horses trotting around, and I've got my guy going up like a rabbit, and I'm like, ooh, how am I feeling right now? Oh, I'm a little tense. Not tense, not I'm afraid, but I'm kind of pissed off from that call I just had. And then you have to get back in, and he's like that on the ground. So interesting. You picked up on a good one, definitely.
And then the other point you make in that presentation is perceptions, is that we have our own perceptions. Like somebody else watching that horse buck while you're on would be thinking, what a bratty horse, you know.
Or what a bad rider, right?
Or what a bad rider. And so, yeah, so just that, bringing that awareness of what perception do you have of that sort of that situation, and maybe why. So
yeah, and I think that's really true. Even on the groundwork, we were doing another training. We have our accreditation trainings, and we were doing one a couple weeks ago, and there was this one woman that knows horses up and down, and we're sort of untraining her, and she's a therapist, and this one particular horse is known to, quote, join up. We didn't train him. I think he probably was trained before he came to us. And for your listeners, joining up is when a horse will just follow you very naturally wherever you go, or follow anybody. And it's a little bit sometimes used of a cowboy trick. Some people go, oh my God, I've never seen this. We always say, oh yeah, this is something the horse does, but we're careful not to do it too much. So anyways, the group had gone, everybody did it perfectly. Well, this person came over and the horse wouldn't move. And I could see the ego, just, and so we let her experience what that was like. And then we're able to turn around and go, wow, look at how you handled something when it didn't do what you meant to. And how was it in your nervous system? We now use the carousel, by the way. We've decided a carousel is better than the ladder because it's the up and down ride. But it was so neat. And I swear that horse knew what to do with this woman who, if I'm being very honest, had given the impression that she knew everything up until that moment. And we were, it's a safe place. You don't want to hurt people's ego. You don't want to confront people. You want people to feel good. But that horse got to her with a way that we couldn't. And then we were able to help her see that this was, her nervous system needed that lesson. She, not the lesson, but that interaction from another nervous system, because her presentation was very much performance. And the horse is like, I ain't doing this. But whatever he picked up in her nervous system just made him go, sorry. So then my nervous system picked up, I need to help her so it's not embarrassing, because there was nothing she could have done. But on the other hand, and I did feel that I had to give it time and then go over and help her. And then it just felt really nice. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Oh, perfect. And I think exactly what you said in terms of the lesson. Now, sometimes we can do our sessions with clients where we unpack polyvagal theory and we do some tracking in their nervous systems, and we sort of talk about some situations in their interactions with others in their environment, other spouses or family members, and it's all very educationally, and we definitely try to bring some experience to it. But having those moments where it's in the moment and they see the impact of what an equine or a dog or could have, is such a powerful lesson of really feeling that in their nervous system. And I'm thinking more to expand this to when you gave your example of the police officers that came and you're helping to teach them about their own autonomic nervous systems, but then the impact of that on the horses. So then they can put it together. Well, how does my nervous system impact, the community around me?
Yep. And the thing that I love so much about Stephen Porges's outlook on life and his scientific theory is moving away from blame and shame and labeling. And it's a song I've been singing for many years as a psychologist, and really felt a little bit like a freak. Like, I kept thinking maybe I was missing something, maybe I needed to understand something. And I believe it. I really do believe that evidence-based is important for a floorboard. But if we're going to really work with extreme situations, even police officers, they're in an extreme situation. They're not, your average conversation. They've got a lot of talk about not feeling safe. We've got to help meet them in a way that takes away shame and blame. Now, in some circumstances, you do get to say, hey, aggression is not okay and whatever you're doing. But I just love the way Porges is like, whatever your nervous system, the message, what's going on is okay unless it's inhibiting your life, right? And then you can think about how do I reconnect with the world with a taking in messages of safety. And I think it's just so basic, it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. It's making those bridges for people, isn't it?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So for practitioners who are interested in expanding their practice, to include equine work, where would they, what sort of decisions do they need to be made in terms of their preparation, in terms of selecting appropriate clients, appropriate horses, and their environment?
So it's a lot. I mean, I would love to say take the PVEI Equine series and then come to Polyvagal Equine Institute and do those series. I'd like to say that I'm going to come to Australia and we're going to do a training there. I think it is very important to understand that there's a bunch of variables. And one of the first variables, if you're a seasoned professional, is unlearning a lot of what you already, a lot of what you have been taught. And if you're actually gravitating to this, you probably think somewhat out of the box. So you need to begin to see horses, the horse, and the client, and in some cases, the horse professional with you as a clinician, as a team. You're collaborating together for the well-being of the world, really, by assisting. And so that's one piece. If you're looking at other programs, of course, I'd love you to come to our program or even virtually to our program. Look at, do they treat the horses? There are other programs out there that do decent jobs. Do they treat the horses like living being horses? They're not metaphors. They're not like I made the mistake all those years. They're not mirrors. Look for the horses taken well care of. Do not do this alone. You have to have a consult group. One of the most important things in my work is I work with people that hold me accountable. And some of what we do is sometimes even to model the connection in front of the clients. And not every horse is right for this. Not every horse can tolerate it. And not every person is right for it. I had a young man that came here to do equine therapy. He's terrified of horses. He hadn't talked to any therapist in a long time. And my cat broke him. He sat and I sat very quietly, and he petted the cat till he felt safe enough to say something really profound. And that was then got quiet again. But to push him to the horses would not have worked. So I think when you say, if you're interested in it, really do your homework. Really make sure you understand the approach that you're going to. There are some approaches that see horses more as vehicles. Some programs that sort of chase horses around, which is not what we're talking about. There's some programs that do a magical, mystical thing, and for some people that really works. It's not my juju. I don't know. There's some people that don't help the client, as I said. Don't, you're paying big bucks sometimes, or maybe not, to go see somebody and they don't give you any feedback, and then you get in the car. You might as well go see an analyst back in the 1940s. you know? So there's a lot of steps that go into it. Have a team. Don't just say, oh, I have horses and I want to do this. Understand what your approach is. Understand, there's so many pieces to this. And then last one I'll say is informed consent. Huge. This is my big bugaboo. If someone comes to you for nervous training, therapy, or coaching, because I really believe coaches have a place in this, and somehow some past abuse comes out, your job is to help them contain it, be sure they have someone else, preferably a licensed person, to talk with, or clergy, or somebody else, and you go back to what they're there for. So some of the programs let the client too much take them into areas they're not equipped to. So for me, being a psychologist, some of what I feel I bring to the table is I know how not to go there as much as go there, because horses will bring amazing things out. And you better be sure that you at least know that this person has somewhere to help contain it, talk about it, or you know what you're doing. And if you've got a group there, you got to be careful, because maybe this kid over here is just there for academic skills. And then this kid starts talking about their sexual assault. And you don't say be quiet, but you have to handle it in such a way that the whole group is safe there.
So I think the good take-home message is to do your research if you're interested in adding this to your practice. In terms of, it sounds like we've definitely got some different approaches out there, and then go and get trained, so then that you're as best equipped to do this therapy justice, so you can get the outcomes that you want.
And that's what's really exciting. I will say that there are more and more people who are really undoing some of the ways we've treated horses, and people have trained horses and all that stuff. There's suddenly this awareness out there in a big way of like, oh, how do we partner? Years ago, my master's thesis on the way to the dissertation was on women that owned horses. And unfortunately, it burned up in the fires when the house went up, because it was typewritten and I didn't have a copy, but I wouldn't have helped anyways. But what I found is that women who rode horses, it was like an N of 80. So it was a decent size versus people that did not have animals. The women that owned horses scored very, very high on the California Personality Assessment on military leadership. Military leadership is a skill that was found at West Point. Now, these days, military anything has a bad rap. But back when I did my dissertation, it was leadership. It was the leadership skill to be able to lead somebody together with them and not from dominance. And that was the single highest variable that horsewomen had. And so that's the most important thing that I believe, is that understanding that they're having a conversation with us. They're not, they need to be treated with respect as colleagues and teachers as well.
And I think, isn't it true that the knowledge around horses has really exploded over the last 10, 20 years, in terms of it isn't just an animal that sort of serves us to just jump on and ride and do, whatever sort of area of horsemanship you're in, but there's an incredible psychology behind it.
Yeah. And people say they have their cerebral cortex is so much smaller than humans, and therefore they're not as intelligent. Some people, I'm like, look, anybody that can rely on their autonomic nervous system in the way that horses do, it's a different type of intelligence. And I personally believe they're very intelligent. And so we just have to understand, in all these different cultures and all these different mammals, whatever, that intelligence in that thing in that culture is defined differently. So we also know that they can recognize something like 67 facial expressions from humans, which is just fascinating. I always pretend I'll do research. As you know, I'm always like, because I know the SSP is really the thing, and we've done it with our horses, not all of them. We've seen some effects. The big challenge is the ears, how to get that music into the ears.
And that was going to be one of my other questions, that since this the podcast is about the Safe and Sound Protocol, and not all my podcasts talk about it, but I know that we've talked in the past about using the SSP with horses who are experiencing a lot of anxiety or have had mistreatment in the past. So just talk a little bit about what you have done.
Well, first of all, you and I need to keep together on this. You and I both get so busy that we sort of part and then come back, because it needs to continue to be looked at. And I still do have a thoroughbred program that if we gave them the right thing, they would use it. They were totally willing. So what we've done with our program is we do have 2 speakers that we got some time ago from Unite, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we put them in the stall at the same exact height. And with this one particular horse, we've done it with a few, but this one particular had the most profound respect. A little horse effect. Little horse named Gypsy. Played the music, I think it was 5 days. And then I knew we did it again. But this particular little horse is really activated when anyone comes near her, like runs like crazy. We don't know why, don't think it's abuse, don't know what it is, but that's her nervous system response. So playing that Safe and Sound protocol was like the 5-hour one. We found within 3 days that you were able to walk up and touch her in the stall very easily, as opposed to her moving away very rapidly. Now, a lot of people that are way smarter with SSP than I am say, well, the problem is it's not a closed space. This particular barn is very quiet. There's no borders there. She was in her own little stall. So I actually think it's doable to do it from that level. But what we did notice was she was much more approachable, like significantly. Mm-hmm. When we did it again, we saw that go up even more. Mm-hmm. Didn't see such a profound effect with another horse. There were many horses impacted by the fire here, including one that was in a stall that collapsed and they got out. And I really had wanted to do more with it, but didn't. And I still would like to see, I still want to see if that can impact.
Mm-hmm. And I've done it in a similar way. I had the little mini boom bots of speakers on each side. Yeah, in a stall with one of my anxious thoroughbreds, and he was definitely more calm afterwards, easier. He actually started to you'll see you in the paddock and start to walk up to you rather than sort of just stand there in freeze. And his shifts were more subtle. You just noticed he felt more comfortable riding out. He used to get more sort of anxiety with leaving his, leaving the barn. So I definitely sort of shift with him. My other boy was, I think I saw the shift in him the month after, which is often what we see with people going through the protocol. It was about a month after that he was just a more calm soul, less reactive to like sound of wind blowing. When normally in the paddock he would get startled and start running around. He was more calmer with other horses. I saw less of that him having to exert dominance or just randomly sort of biting the other horses, which can be all horse behavior, but he seemed to just settle in and be more relaxed. And so those are the things that I noticed with him. And we have a lot of feedback, Rebecca, of people using speakers just with clients at home and getting great feedback that's there's really sensitive nervous system, that the protocol, the way it's filtered, yes, we do lose some of that in the open environment, but there's still enough that gets in and gets absorbed into the nervous system that creates enough change in that nervous system that then we can go ahead maybe along and tolerate having the headphones in later on. But maybe I need to develop a little sort of headphones for the horses, but I'm not sure if that'll just be too much. I'm not sure.
No, I don't think, that's a Mantha, whatever. I want to ask you a question. That is it the classical protocol or the other one?
I've did, because the classicals recently is more recent. I did the vocals, the adult vocals, love it. But I have a new boy that I think I'd like to try the new classical on, because I'd be curious to see what that effect.
So you and I are going to do this. We are
Mm.
going to write it up and we're going to figure out, I mean, I really want to do it because I feel the other thing, I've had a lot of people approach me from around the country about, you know, horse and rider combo. That's not really my thing. I'm not so much interested in the show stuff anymore, but it just occurred to me when you were talking, like, duh, having the rider sitting outside of the stall listening while the horse did, we could also see like a really profound shift, right?
Yes,
With
yes.
but this is it. We have to make this, let's make this the year that we write this thing up and that we do it. And I have to pick your brain a little bit because like probably some of your listeners, I get, what is it? There's so much to do with clients that I'm like, how do I put this in there too? And so I really want to keep working on that and figure out how to do it, particularly for the first responders that we train. I really think it would be wonderful. But the next step is to really see it with the horses and see what we see fully. I will tell you that horse summit, the one you're talking about, I have seen this horse's nervous system change just by the power of play and the power of relaxation. And so I share that as it is no joke that you can reset, train the nervous system in our kids, in ourselves, in people around us. We really can, if we're really conscious of saying, I want to make this safe for you. And I'm sending you messages of safety, that you're okay who you are, right?
Yes, yes, yes. I like that. I like that. So any listeners who are listening in and you work with horses and you'd like to maybe collaborate with us on this, send me an email, joanne@integratedlistening.com.au. We'll also put a link on the show notes and on our podcast page, and then we could partner in and put something on maybe on the Institute as well for the people who are interested in maybe being involved in.
And Polyvagal Equine too. Let's do it.
Yes.
I feel like we just have to tell them exactly what it is we're doing and how we're doing it, and then execute it.
Yes, yes, yes. Have all some parameters around it so we can control and get some good data. That would be exciting. Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought that up again. Yeah, yes, excellent. Yeah. So it's coming to a bit of a close. Any favorite book or a recommended book that you could maybe sort of recommend to people who kind of want to learn a little more about the therapeutic work with horses, how that sort of comes?
Is it terrible if I say Polyvagal Principles, Equine Connections?
Yeah,
the feedback I'm getting, it was my COVID baby. I wrote it like most of us, doing sequestering in between Zoom calls and COVID. And it's very simple. It is not complicated. And so if you really want to know about the nuts and bolts, I really do encourage that book. And you can get it on Amazon. You can download it as PDF as well. And, you know, I'm not going to get rich on the sales, but would love that. JC's book, A Stolen Life, is tough going in the beginning because it's the story of her being held captive. Towards the end, it does talk not in polyvagal terms, but sort of in the play and the relationship of horses. And I actually, I think it comes across very well. And then randomly, I'm really stuck on this new book, The Invisible Kingdom, which has nothing to do with horses, but it has to do with this woman's pursuit of getting adequate medical care for her illness. And the reason I mention it to listeners is it's really about the power of listening and supporting and being curious. And then she also sheds light on the way that we can feel when we feel like hopeless about helping somebody, how we can almost make it worse. So I don't know. I just have to, I'm so into this book right now. And then of course, read the book, The Horse.
The Horse.
Oh my God. And I cannot remember her name. It's The Horse. And in it is polyvagal relationship. And there's some tough stuff. It's about a jockey and horses, but it's a fiction, but it's polyvagal. I'm telling you about this jockey's relationship with the horse. And that's another really, like, to sound like an old lady, yummy thing to read. Like, I was like, whoa, I was like underlining it and asterisking it. So that's
Isn't it
what
funny? Isn't it funny when you start to have this lens of looking at the world, how you start to sort of see it in different things you read, and yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, so those are my recommendations.
Thank you. And then lastly, let's just finish with you talking about the certification program that you're running through the Polyvagal Equine Institute.
So right now what we're doing, and it's whether we call what certification or accreditation, I get upside down, but we have, if you go on the websites, you're going to see more. Our advanced accreditation is basically a 5-day, 6-day, 6 months of Zoom consultation membership, where we're doing really fun things. Like, we did an interview with Sue Carter, we interviewed Deb Dana, and that's going to be available to Lynn Thomas, who started EGALA, some random folks, Nilofer, I don't know if you know Nilofer from the Polyvagal Institute, who does a thing on intergenerational work. And so that's one aspect. The other one is we have monthly fundamental classes in fundamental of polyvagal and equine work. So if you go on the website, it's all there. We're really encouraging people to join the herd. We're building rapidly. Again, we have this fabulous class coming out with PVEI, which is meant to be a tickler to send you over to us. I don't know if they love that, but I'm kidding. We also love PVEI. It's our family. But so there's the different levels. So there's the one that's basically just for people to learn and experience their own nervous system, and then people that actually want to go and do this on a bigger level. And so we really encourage people to join in with us. And we're really excited, and again, so honored that we're allowed to call ourselves Polyvagal Equine Institute. It's pretty special.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to see how the Institute grows, and I'm sure it's going to get a big uptake, and because this kind of work can be pretty amazing. Definitely.
Oh, fabulous. And I'm so glad you're there and honored that you had me on.
No, thank you so much, Rebecca, and thank you for all your information and your knowledge, and how you share that into such, not only in the equine world, into the other worlds that you're doing in the justice system, making a big change. So thank you. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for saying that.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
I so hope you all enjoyed our conversation. I will put links to the Polyvagal Equine Institute in our show notes, as well as the Safe and Sound Protocol podcast Facebook page. I have to share that I am so excited to be traveling to California to complete the Level 1 and Level 2 Polyvagal Equine Institute certification this coming May and June. So stay tuned, as I will be sharing with you about my experience and learning in a future podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the Safe and Sound Protocol in Australia and New Zealand, please contact Integrated Listening Australia. The website is integratedlistening.com.au, and for the rest of the world, please contact Unite Integrated Listening at integratedlistening.com.